I remember the day I found out my 70th birthday party had been cancelled. I was sitting in my sunroom, sipping tea from a porcelain cup that had belonged to my mother, when my son Daniel called. His voice was tight, rehearsed almost. "Mom," he began, "Madison thinks it's best if we postpone your party. With everything going on, she's worried it might be too much." Too much. The word echoed like a slap. I had spent months choosing the venue, the guest list, the champagne that had to be flown in from France. My garden had been trimmed for photographs. My dress already fitted. 70 was supposed to be a celebration, a testament to surviving the storms of life and still standing. But Madison decided it was too much. Through the tall glass windows, the afternoon light spilled across my marble floors. Everything gleamed, perfect, curated, lifeless. Just like Madison liked it. I asked Hunter if it was truly her idea or his. He hesitated, then said softly, "It's better this way, Mom." And in that hesitation I heard it, the quiet sound of control shifting away from me into her hands. I hung up before my voice could betray me. I refused to cry. But that night, as I walked through my empty dining room, I realized something colder than disappointment had settled inside me. It wasn't sadness. It was resolve. Madison came into our lives like a gust of polished wind, all charm, confidence, and curated perfection. She had the kind of beauty that photographs well. Sleek hair, sharp cheekbones, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. When Hunter introduced her 8 years ago, I thought she was lovely, if a little rehearsed. He was smitten and I wanted him to be happy. But from the moment she married my son, Madison began redecorating. Not just the house but our lives. The family dinners I used to host every Sunday slowly migrated to their home. My roast chicken was too heavy. My dining set was too traditional. My advice, outdated. At first I thought she was just trying to make her own mark. Every new wife does. But Madison didn't want a place at the table. She wanted to replace the table entirely. Daniel, my only child, became quieter with time. His laugh, once warm and spontaneous, turned into something reserved, almost cautious, as if joy needed Madison's permission. She managed everything. His diet, his clothes, his friends, even his words. And whenever I spoke to him, Madison was always there. Hovering, smiling that soft, patronizing smile, pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law. "We just want what's best for you, Mom," she would say, her tone dipped in honey and steel. The first major crack appeared last Christmas. I had arranged a small family dinner at my home. Nothing extravagant, just a cozy evening with carols, champagne, and old friends. Hunter called the night before to cancel. Madison had other plans. I spent Christmas Eve alone for the first time in decades, watching the lights blink over the gifts no one would open. And yet I tried. God knows I tried. I invited her for tea, praised her taste in decor, even wore the beige dress she once said made me look expensive. But her compliments were knives wrapped in silk. "You're so elegant for your age," she'd say, sipping her green juice. "Most women your age let themselves go." I would smile politely, but each word left a bruise I could never quite hide. When I began planning my 70th birthday, I thought perhaps it could be a bridge. One last chance to reclaim my place, my dignity, maybe even my son. I hired a planner, booked a ballroom at the Bellefontaine Hotel, and ordered invitations embossed with gold leaf. Madison offered to handle the guest list. And in a moment of foolish trust, I let her. That was my mistake. Looking back now, I should have seen it. The quiet smirk when I mentioned the band, the way she changed the subject when I asked about the RSVPs. But I wanted peace more than pride. And that's how she won. The cancellation was just the final move in a game she had been playing for years. The days after the cancellation were strangely quiet. Too quiet. People began calling. Old friends, cousins, even my sister from Spain, asking about the party. "I never got the final invitation," they'd say. Did the venue change? First I was confused, then humiliated. Madison had told everyone that I had decided to cancel, that I was too tired, too frail, too overwhelmed by the attention. I could almost hear her voice in their sympathetic tones. You know how exhausting things can be for her at that age. We just want her to rest. Rest. As if I were a fragile relic being tucked away for safekeeping. That week I stopped answering the phone. I couldn't bear the pity. My world, once full of polished luncheons and charity galas, shrank into silence. The house, with all its chandeliers and imported rugs, Felt like a museum, beautiful but utterly devoid of life. Hunter visited once, bringing a bouquet of white lilies. Madison's choice, I'm sure. He looked nervous, distracted, unable to meet my eyes. She meant well, Mom, he said softly. Madison thought the party would be stressful for you. Stressful? I laughed bitterly. I've hosted events larger than that before Madison even learned which fork to use. He winced, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. Proud, kind, protective. But just as quickly, his expression shuttered. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder. The word stuck in my throat. I wanted to scream that she was the one making it hard, that she was quietly erasing me, inch by inch, under the guise of care. But I didn't. I simply nodded because I knew that anything I said would make me sound bitter. And bitterness, in a wealthy family, is treated like madness. After he left, I sat in the dim light of the dining room, staring at the table that once held laughter and clinking glasses. Now, only dust gathered there. I thought of all the things I had given. The inheritance, the house deed I had partially signed over to Hunter for convenience, the years of love. And for what? To be dismissed by a woman who wore my son's last name like a trophy. Days bled into weeks. Madison never called. Not once. But gossip travels faster than guilt. Through a friend, I learned that she'd gone ahead and hosted another event the very weekend of my cancelled party. A fundraiser for one of her social clubs. Same date, same venue. She hadn't cancelled the party. She'd replaced it. I remember staring at the photo someone sent me. Madison in a silver gown, standing where my name should have been on the banner behind her. Empower Women's Brunch, it read. My son stood beside her, smiling faintly, holding a champagne flute. Something in me broke that night. Not loudly but cleanly, like the snap of a bone. For a week, I didn't leave my bed. Then something shifted. Grief cooled into clarity. I began noticing things. Small things Madison never thought I'd see. The bank alerts on my phone showing withdrawals I didn't make. The property management emails redirected to her account. Even my personal assistant, Mira, confessed one afternoon that Madison had been calling her directly, to simplify communications. Simplify. Another pretty word for control. I realized then that Madison wasn't satisfied with sidelining me socially. She wanted to remove me entirely. To rewrite me out of my own life story. And so I began to plan. I started by calling the Bellefontaine Hotel under a different name, asking about the women's brunch that took place that weekend. The manager, unaware of who I really was, cheerfully shared the details. The cost, the guest list, even the custom champagne labels that bore Madison's initials. My initials. She had used my prepaid deposits, my event planner, my caterer, everything. My 70th birthday had funded her rise in that shallow, glittering social circle. I hung up the phone and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face, though aged, was sharp with purpose. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't frail. I had simply been too trusting. That night, I sat by my window overlooking the city lights, sipping the last of the French champagne I had ordered for my cancelled party. The bubbles felt colder than usual, each one bursting with a quiet reminder. Madison believed she had won. She had no idea I was already watching her, waiting for the moment when the same glitter she loved so much would blind her. Because power, like wealth, has a way of shifting hands, silently, elegantly, and always when least expected. The following weeks unfolded like a long, luxurious nightmare. Every morning I woke to the same silence, heavy, deliberate, like the house itself was holding its breath. The staff moved quietly, tiptoeing as if mourning some invisible loss. Even Mira, my assistant, began speaking in hushed tones, afraid to disturb the strange peace that had settled over me. For the first time in my life, I had no invitations to RSVP to, no charity luncheons, no social events. I had become a ghost in my own circle. And all of it, the whispers, the sudden distance, the polite pity, traced back to Madison. She told people I was unwell, that stress was affecting my judgment, that I was taking a step back from public life. Back. What a lovely euphemism for erasure. At first, the betrayal made me tremble with anger. But then, an odd calm began to take its place. Because once you realize the worst has already happened, you stop fearing what comes next. So I began to watch. Not react, not fight, just observe. Through my silence, I learned more about Madison than I ever did while pretending to like her. The woman was meticulous, obsessed with image. Every post on her social media painted the perfect life. Weekend brunches, luxury retreats, empowerment seminars. Always smiling, always luminous. But perfection is a fragile thing. It cracks under the slightest touch of truth. One afternoon, I attended a small gallery event downtown, one of the few places Madison never went because the art scene had become too common. I ran into Elise, an old acquaintance who had always adored Daniel. We chatted politely, and then she said something that stopped my breath. "Madison mentioned you were planning to downsize," she said. "She told me you're moving into a smaller apartment in the city soon. Is that true?" Downsize. I hadn't heard a word about it. My home, my late husband's legacy, wasn't just real estate. It was memory carved into marble and glass. I smiled through the shock. "Oh, did she?" I said smoothly. How thoughtful of her to plan my future. When I returned home that evening, I called my lawyer. Quietly, without alerting anyone, we reviewed my estate documents. I learned that while I still technically owned my properties, Madison's name appeared on several management contracts, temporary authorizations Hunter had added to make things easier while you rest. There it was again, that cursed word. My lawyer's tone was delicate but firm. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, if you hadn't checked this now, you might have lost control of more than you realize." That night I couldn't sleep. The air felt thick, pressing against my chest. I walked through the halls, past the portraits of my family, the glittering chandeliers, the scent of polish and flowers that never quite faded. Every corner of that house whispered of the life I had built, and the woman quietly trying to take it from me. But she underestimated one thing. I had learned to survive long before she learned to charm. The next morning, I began reclaiming what was mine, elegantly, silently. I instructed my lawyer to reverse every authorization. I updated the bank accounts, froze non-essential access, and reassigned all communication to my personal channels. By the end of that week, Madison's control was reduced to nothing more than rumor. And yet, I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would have been too kind. Instead, I made sure she saw me, thriving, present, and untouchably calm. I began attending select social gatherings again, dressed impeccably, smiling serenely whenever her name came up. My silence, my composure unnerved people. They expected rage or tears. But I offered neither. When people asked about my health, I simply said, "I've never felt better." Whispers began to shift. People started questioning the narrative Madison had spun. And in the brittle world of social grace, doubt spreads faster than truth. Then came the first crack in her perfect facade. A friend from the Belle Fontaine called to invite me to a charity gala, the same hotel Madison had hijacked for her women's brunch. She seemed distressed, my friend added hesitantly. Apparently, there's been an issue with her accounts. Some expenses from that event weren't covered. Smiled. How unfortunate. Because I knew exactly why. Those funds, once under her control, had been reclaimed. Every cent she used under my name was now traceable to her. The next few days were deliciously quiet. And then the inevitable happened. Madison appeared at my door. It was late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip behind the glass veranda, painting the marble floors with gold. She stood there in a cream coat, her hair pulled too tightly, her expression brittle beneath her practiced poise. "Mother," she began, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. "May I come in?" For a long moment, I simply looked at her. This was the same woman who'd stolen my celebration, my reputation, my son's loyalty. Yet standing there, she looked smaller, drained. I nodded once. Of course. I would hate to seem inhospitable. We sat in the drawing room. She crossed her legs, fingers trembling as she tried to appear composed. I poured tea, the same delicate rose blend she used to mock. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "Some people have been talking. It's affecting my social engagements." "Ah," I murmured, stirring my tea. "So now appearances matter." Her mask faltered. For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind her eyes. "You've been," she stopped herself, adjusted her tone. "I mean, people are saying things that aren't true. I wanted to ask if you could attend the Belle Fontaine Gala next month. It would mean a lot. It would clarify things." In other words, she needed my presence to restore her image. The irony was exquisite. The same woman who'd cancelled my birthday party now begging me to attend her event. I took a slow sip of tea, savoring the moment. "I'll think about it," I said softly. "If I have the time." She opened her mouth to argue, then thought better of it. For a long moment we sat in silence. The air between us was heavy with unspoken truths. The lies she'd told, the control she'd lost, the quiet power I had reclaimed. As she left, I watched her reflection in the mirrored hallway. Poised, perfect, cracking. When the door closed, I felt something uncoil inside me. Not victory, something quieter, steadier. The knowledge that I had outlasted her. For years I'd been told to rest. But now I was awake. And this time the next move would be mine. A week after Madison's visit, the invitations arrived. Thick cream cards with gold lettering that shimmered faintly under the light. The Bellefontaine Gala. An evening of empowerment, hosted by Madison Hollingsworth. Her name stood alone this time. No Daniel. No board affiliations. No sponsors. A desperate grasp at visibility. I placed the card on the mantel beside the photographs of my late husband. He'd been a man who understood power. Not the noisy kind, but the sort that moved through silence and timing. "Patience is a blade, Sarah," he once told me. "You don't swing it wildly. You let it gleam until they walk right into it." That night I decided to attend. The morning of the gala, I dressed with precision. My stylist had chosen a deep sapphire gown, understated yet impossible to ignore. Pearls at my throat, hair swept into a timeless chignon. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a woman erased. I saw the woman they had underestimated. At the Bellefontaine, the valet recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, it's wonderful to see you again. We thought you'd stopped hosting events here." Smiled. "Not anymore." Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and shallow laughter. Every table was crowned with white orchids, Madison's signature. I could see her across the room, radiant in a silver gown, her smile stretched too thin. She was greeting guests with the forced grace of someone who knew things were slipping. Hunter stood beside her, looking uneasy. His collar was stiff, his eyes darting. When he saw me enter, his face flickered with confusion, then relief. "Mother," he murmured as he hurried over. "I didn't think you'd come." "Neither did Madison," I said lightly. She turned at the sound of my voice, and for a heartbeat, her composure shattered. "You came," she breathed, masking shock with a brittle smile. "How wonderful. Everyone will be thrilled." "Oh, I'm sure they will," I said, brushing her cheek with a polite air kiss. The photographer approached immediately. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, may I have a photo of the two of you?" Madison hesitated, perhaps remembering how she'd once edited me out of a family portrait, but the camera was already flashing. As the evening progressed, I watched the crowd. Whispers traveled like perfume. Soft, intoxicating, and everywhere. Some came to greet me warmly. Others simply stared, trying to decode the sudden thaw between us. It gave nothing away. Halfway through dinner, the event coordinator approached the stage, thanking Mrs. Sarah Hollingsworth for her generous contribution. Madison blinked, confused. She hadn't expected that. I had quietly redirected the sponsorship funds weeks earlier, through my foundation under my name. Every banner, every brochure, every press release now bore the correction. Madison's event existed because of me. Applause filled the hall. Cameras turned in my direction. I rose gracefully, nodding once in acknowledgement. When I sat back down, Madison's hand trembled against her glass. You did this," she whispered, smile frozen for the cameras. "I merely ensured the proper name was on the donation," I said. "Transparency matters, don't you think?" The color drained from her face. Moments later, one of the hotel's senior staff quietly approached her table. I caught fragments of the conversation. Unpaid invoices, unauthorized use of corporate accounts, pending investigations. The staff's tone was polite but firm, the kind that belongs to those who know the balance of power has shifted. By dessert, the whispers had changed entirely. Madison's laugh grew brittle. Daniel's face stiffened. When the event concluded, I stood near the exit. Guests came to congratulate me, thanking me for returning to the social scene, for saving the gala. Each compliment was a small incision in Madison's pride. Finally she approached. Her posture was perfect, but her eyes, once sharp with calculation, looked hollow. "You've made your point," she said quietly. "Congratulations." "My point?" I tilted my head. "Oh, Madison, this isn't a game. It's simply balance being restored." Hunter tried to intervene, but I touched his arm gently. Son, go on ahead. Your wife and I will be right behind you. When he left, I faced her fully. You could have had a mother, I said softly. Instead, you wanted a throne. And now you've lost both. Her breath caught. People will forget tonight, she whispered. They always do, I replied. But I don't. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Not angrily this time, but almost pleading. Please don't cut us off. We can fix this. I paused at the door, the murmur of the ballroom fading behind me. You should have thought of that before you cancelled my party. Then I stepped into the corridor, my heels clicking softly against marble, a rhythm of finality. Outside, the cool night air felt like freedom. Reporters were already gathering near the entrance, flashes igniting as they asked about the grand return of Sarah Hollingsworth. I smiled for every camera. For years, Madison had tried to erase me. Tonight I was the headline. As my car pulled away, I glanced back through the tinted glass. Madison stood alone under the chandelier's light, her silver gown gleaming like a cracked mirror. For the first time, she looked exactly as she was, polished on the outside, hollow within. And in that fragile stillness, I felt the strange satisfaction of justice served quietly, elegantly, completely. The morning after the gala, sunlight poured into my room like an apology. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. The papers arrived early, crisp, folded, smelling faintly of ink and validation. Across the social column, a headline gleamed. Sarah Hollingsworth returns in graceful triumph. The matriarch reclaims her legacy. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the words settle. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, about reminding myself and everyone else who I was before Madison's quiet campaign to erase me. Hunter called that afternoon. His voice trembled slightly, not from anger but from shame. Mom, I didn't know everything. I should have. I stopped him gently. You don't need to explain, Daniel. I just hope you've finally opened your eyes. There was silence on the line, a heavy, aching silence that said more than words could. Madison didn't call. She wouldn't. Pride was her armor, even when it was cracking. I didn't need her apology. I had already taken back the one thing she could never fake: respect. That evening, I stood on the veranda overlooking the garden, the same garden I had once trimmed for a party that never happened. The roses were in bloom again, defiant and alive, as if time had conspired with me. I thought about the woman I had been before all this. Soft, accommodating, too polite to confront cruelty dressed as courtesy. That version of me was gone, buried beneath marble and lessons learned. I had been erased once. Never again. In this world, people mistake grace for weakness. But true grace, I've learned, is knowing when to smile, and when to let silence do the talking. The wind stirred the curtains behind me, carrying the faint echo of distant laughter. Hers, perhaps once so sure, now uncertain. I closed my eyes and exhaled, feeling not bitterness but clarity. Life doesn't always give you the revenge you dream of. Sometimes it gives you something better. A front row seat to your enemy's unraveling, and the peace of knowing you never had to dirty your hands to see it happen. I turned, walking back into the house that was once too quiet, now filled with purpose again. Tomorrow I would host a small dinner, intimate, joyful, filled with laughter. Not a 70th birthday, but a celebration all the same. Because finally the story was mine again. If you were Sarah, would you have forgiven Madison, or made her pay the same way? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe that no one should ever underestimate a quiet woman, like, share and subscribe, because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.